We look at the Great Pyramid of Giza and think we know it. For thousands of years, we have stood before that stone colossus, always hearing the same story, a simple and comfortable narrative. It is the story of an all-powerful pharaoh, tens of thousands of slaves, and 20 years of superhuman effort to build his eternal tomb. It is the story found in the school books that tour guides repeat tirelessly, the foundation upon which entire careers of Egyptologists have been built. But this familiar and accepted story is starting to be questioned, a narrative that perhaps does not hold up when confronted with cold, relentless mathematics. I will be your guide through this world of hidden truths. Instead of an archaeologist's pickaxe or a yellowed papyrus, our tool today will be Numa, an analytical system capable of processing mountains of data to reveal what is hidden from human eyes. We will not deal with assumptions, only with numbers, physics, and logic. Our investigation begins with a fundamental question. Could Bronze Age man have built the Great Pyramid? The answer we find will shake your deepest certainties. This is the first chapter of our journey. Let's accept the official version for a moment as a starting point. Egyptology tells us that the Pyramid of Cheops was built in about 20 years. It is composed of approximately 2,300,000 stone blocks. The total weight of the structure exceeds 6 million tons. Each block weighs an average of 2.5 tons, but there are giants of 70 and even 80 tons. The workforce was basically an army of peasants occupied in their fields 9 months a year. Only during the 3 months of the Nile's flooding could they be summoned for state works. It seems to make sense, doesn't it? Thousands of people, many years of work. It seems logical, but the truth, as always, is in the details. And in our case, it lies in a simple arithmetic calculation. We entered these official data into Numa to perform a stress test on the logistical model. The system needed to answer a single question. What was the actual work speed required to finish the project on time? The result was staggering. To finish the pyramid in 20 years, working 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, without a single day off, the builders would have to quarry, transport, finish, and perfectly set one block every 2.5 minutes, one block every 150 seconds, day and night, summer and winter for 20 years straight. And we are not talking about bricks. We are talking about multi-ton rocks that first needed to be cut from the mountain, then delivered miles away, and finally raised to a height of nearly 150 meters. The conventional view presents us with this scenario, but let's explore if it truly aligns with what we know of the laws of physics. Let's break down this impossible cycle, starting with the extraction. Most of the pyramid is made of limestone, taken right there on the Giza Plateau. But for the internal chambers and the sarcophagus, super hard granite from Aswan was used. The Aswan quarries are over 800 kilometers south of Giza. The tools the Egyptians possessed were primitive copper chisels and stone spheres. Copper is a very soft metal, completely useless against granite. We asked Numa to simulate the process of extracting a single 70-ton block of granite using only this technology. The simulation showed that to tear out a block of this size would require years of continuous work from thousands of men. And there are dozens of such blocks in the pyramid. All of them needed to be extracted within that absurd schedule. This is the first logistical collapse, which leads us to the second stage, transport. How do you carry a 70-ton monolith from Aswan to Giza? The official version says, by boat on the Nile. But what boats could handle that weight? We are talking about fragile vessels of reeds and wood, held together by ropes. Numa analyzed all known data on ancient Egyptian shipbuilding. The conclusion is clear. Since there is no evidence of ships capable of transporting loads over 30 tons, transporting these giants by the Nile is a myth without any basis in engineering calculations. And what about the millions of limestone blocks? They say they used wooden sleds. Numa calculated the environmental impact of this. To create enough sleds, it would be necessary to cut down all the forests in Egypt and Lebanon, causing an unprecedented ecological catastrophe of which there is no trace. This is the second logistical collapse. Then remains the most impressive stage, the construction itself. How to lift the blocks. The most popular theory speaks of a giant ramp, but mathematics once again is heartless. To maintain a gentle angle, a straight ramp to the top of the pyramid would be over 1.5 kilometers long. Calculations show that building such a ramp would require more material and work than the pyramid itself. And the main question, where did this colossal structure go afterward? It evaporated. Millions of tons of stone simply vanished without a trace. Other theories, like the spiral ramp, are even worse because they would cover the faces of the pyramid, making it impossible to maintain the geometric precision we see today. With so many open questions, the conventional narrative about the construction of the Great Pyramid invites us to explore other possibilities. It contradicts mathematics, physics, logistics, and common sense. The great work could not have been done by those to whom it is attributed, and that leads us to the most unsettling question of all. If it wasn't them, then who was it? And more importantly, how? In the first part, we challenged the myth of brute force with an analysis of surprising numbers. Mathematics showed us that the official history, with its armies of workers and primitive tools, is a house of cards that collapses at the first breath of logic. The question of who built the pyramid remains, but the even deeper question is how. If the enigma of the Great Pyramid is not a matter of the quantity of arms, perhaps it is a matter of the quality of the mind behind the project. The focus of our analysis now shifts from impossible work to impossible precision. We will open the sarcophagus, where the mummy of a pharaoh does not rest, but an artifact much more valuable, the intelligence of its creators, an intelligence that thought in categories inaccessible to the man of that era. This is the second chapter of our investigation, and its name is The Geometry of the Gods. When we speak of precision, we are not referring to a well-done stone placement. We are talking about precision engineering on a planetary scale frozen in rock. Let's start with the foundation. The Pyramid of Cheops sits on a rock foundation of over 53,000 square meters, the area of 10 football fields. Well, this gigantic foundation was leveled with a deviation that does not exceed 2 centimeters. Visualizing this task is an exercise in humility. You have no laser levels, theodolites, or any modern surveying instruments. You have only primitive viewfinders and, as we are told, copper tools. Official Egyptology suggests the water level theory. Supposedly, the builders dug a network of channels, filled them with water, and used the perfectly flat surface as a reference. Sounds ingenious, doesn't it? We entered this hypothesis into Numa for a hydrodynamic and climatic simulation. The system considered the average temperature on the Giza Plateau, wind speed, sunlight, and the porosity of the limestone. The result completely destroys this beautiful theory. In such a vast area, water evaporation would occur unevenly, creating errors of centimeters per day. The slightest wind would create ripples, distorting the level, and water would inevitably leak into the porous limestone. Numa's simulation shows that the probability of achieving the observed precision with this method is insignificant. The creators used a different method, much more advanced, whose traces we either don't see or cannot understand. But that is just the foundation. The real miracle begins when we look up. The Great Pyramid is oriented to the cardinal points with phenomenal accuracy. Two faces point to true geographic north, south, east, and west. The error is only 3/60ths of a degree, the equivalent of 3 arc minutes. It is a precision that medieval cathedral builders, with the best compasses of their time, would envy. The compass, by the way, was unknown in ancient Egypt and points to the magnetic pole, not the geographic one. How did they achieve this? The theory says they observed the stars. Numa calculated the error of this method, considering atmospheric refraction. The verdict was discouraging. Even in perfect conditions, the error would be at least 1 to 4 of a degree, 5 times greater than what we see in reality. Now let's go from the general outlines to the individual blocks. Originally, the pyramid was covered by 144,000 white limestone casing stones, polished to a mirror-like shine. They were fitted so tightly that the gap between them did not exceed 0.5 millimeter. A knife blade cannot enter that space. The dimension of this is hard to grasp. What we see there resembles precision mechanical engineering, part fitting, more than traditional masonry. To achieve this, each of the 144,000 slabs needed perfectly flat faces and perfectly right angles. How was this done? With copper saws and sand. Numa's analysis showed that centuries of manual polishing would be required for each individual block. The pinnacle of this impossible precision is hidden inside the pyramid, in the so-called King's Chamber. The walls, floor, and ceiling are made of Aswan granite, one of the hardest minerals on Earth, but the main artifact is the sarcophagus. Carved from a single 3-ton piece of granite, it is a technological masterpiece. Its internal surfaces are perfectly flat. Its internal corners are perfectly square, as if they had been milled by a modern CNC machine. Yet any impact tool would leave rounded corners and an irregular surface. What we see here is something else. The most impressive discovery came from engineer Christopher Dunn. He found inside the sarcophagus and on other granite artifacts the marks of tubular drilling. Most revealing are the spiral grooves left by the tool. The analysis of these grooves shows that the drill penetrated the granite at a speed hundreds of times faster than possible with manual drilling. Numa calculated the necessary physical parameters. To cut granite at this speed, the drill would need to rotate at very high speeds under tons of pressure. These are the specifications of a powerful industrial machine, not a man turning a copper tube. The pyramid builders mastered the high-precision machining of super-hard rocks 4,500 years ago. All this geometry, all this precision is not for a tomb. No pharaoh would demand or even notice this. These are the technical characteristics of a complex instrument disguised as a grave. And that leads us to a new question. If the pyramid was not a tomb, what was it for? If you are enjoying this analysis, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It would be a blessing for us. Your help is very important. So far, our journey has shown us that the Great Pyramid could not have been built with the strength and tools of the Bronze Age. Mathematics debunked the logistics. Engineering revealed a precision bordering on the supernatural. We are faced with a work that seems to have been guided by a much higher intelligence. But every project of this magnitude starts with a plan, a master design. And what if the precision we saw in the rock, the cuts and the angles, was just a reflection of an even greater precision engraved not on the ground, but directly in the sky? The Giza complex goes far beyond a set of tombs. It is a map frozen in stone that points to a specific place and, even more unbelievably, to a specific time in a past so remote it defies history itself. This is the 3rd chapter, and we call it the Star Code. At first glance, The layout of the three great pyramids on the Giza Plateau seems strange. The two largest, Cheops and Khafra, are almost aligned, but the third, Menkaure, is smaller and visibly offset to the side. Why? Why break an almost perfect symmetry? For decades, Egyptologists blamed the terrain or the whim of a pharaoh. They sought the answer on Earth when they only needed to lift their eyes. In 1994, researcher Robert Bauval proposed a hypothesis that changed our view of Giza forever. He suggested that the location of the three pyramids exactly replicates the position of the three stars in Orion's belt. We entered this theory, known as the Orion correlation theory, into our NUMA system for an impartial verification. The system overlaid the map of Giza onto the map of the night sky. The result was astounding. The correspondence was perfect. The largest pyramid, Cheops, corresponds to the brightest star, Alnitak. The second, Khafre, to the central star, Alnilam. And the smallest and offset one, Menkaure, corresponds precisely to the third and least bright star, Mintaka. The misalignment that seemed like an error was, in fact, an act of genius, reproducing the celestial pattern with absolute fidelity. Numa calculated the probability of this being a coincidence. The chance of a multi-level correspondence like this, position and relative brightness, being accidental, is less than 1 in a million. It is not a coincidence. It is a project. But the most shocking part was yet to come. The map of the sky is not static. Due to a phenomenon called the precession of the equinoxes, the Earth's axis slowly wobbles like a giant spinning top, completing a cycle every 25,920 years. This oscillation changes the apparent position of the stars over millennia. The correlation between the pyramids and Orion in the time of Cheops, around 2500 BC, was strong, but not perfect. Bauval wondered, was there a moment in the past when the correspondence was absolute? To test this, an astronomical simulation was run backward in time, searching for the point of perfect alignment. The system began rewinding the millennia, 3000 BC, 4000, 5000. The image became increasingly precise. And then, at the mark of 10,500 BC, the simulation stopped. At that moment, and only at that moment, the stars of Orion's belt occupied a position in the sky that mathematically duplicated the layout of the pyramids on Earth. 10,500 BC, 12,500 years ago. This date represents a profound challenge to traditionally accepted historical chronology. According to the accepted timeline, there was no civilization at that time. It was the Stone Age, a time of hunter-gatherers living in caves. And yet, we are asked to believe that in this exact period, someone developed the master plan for the most sophisticated structure on the planet, encoding within it high-complexity astronomical data. The map, in fact, is even larger. The Nile River flows beside the Giza Plateau, just as the brilliant band of the Milky Way passes beside the constellation of Orion in the sky. Numa compared the geography of the Nile with the projection of the Milky Way, and again found an undeniable correlation. The Giza complex is a three-dimensional model of a portion of our sky, with the pyramids being Orion and the Nile being the Milky Way. And this map points to a date, 10,500 BC. How to reconcile this with the evidence that truly points to the era of the pharaohs? The mystery deepens with the so-called ventilation shafts. We know they are not for ventilation. They are astronomical sites, and they point to specific stars like Orion and Sirius in their exact positions in the sky around 2500 BC. It's like a factory plate with the assembly date. So, we have a master plan dated to 10,500 BC and a commissioning date of 2500 BC, an 8,000-year gap between project and execution. What does this mean? Numa proposes a single logical model where the project would have been created by a highly advanced civilization in the 11th millennium BC. 8,000 years later, the pharaohs of Egypt found these structures. Perhaps they completed or renovated them and appropriated their glory. Cheops was not the architect. He was, at most, the last foreman. The question is now different. If these designers possessed such astronomical knowledge, what kind of technology did they use in their daily lives? The clues are everywhere, hidden in plain sight, and they speak of a power that official history insists on ignoring. Our investigation so far has led us to an inevitable conclusion. Behind the Giza complex, there is an intelligence with an astounding mastery of mathematics, engineering, and astronomy. We saw that the work was logistically impossible, the precision was superhuman, and the master plan was written in the stars, pointing to an unthinkable antiquity. But knowledge, however advanced, is inert without the tools to apply it. If they could design with such perfection, they needed tools to materialize that perfection. If they could calculate stellar cycles of 26,000 years, their technologies went far beyond copper chisels and vegetable fiber ropes. Where are these technologies? Where are the machines, the power sources, the equipment? Archaeologists shrug and insist they find nothing but primitive artifacts. But what if we are looking the wrong way? What if the evidence has always been in front of us, but we failed to recognize it? Hidden in plain sight, disguised as ritual objects, erroneously catalogued as mythological symbols. The time has come to tear away the veil covering these silent witnesses. We will open the vault of forbidden knowledge that official science prefers to keep locked. This is the 4th chapter of our investigation, and its name is Artifacts of a Lost Technology. Let's start with a simple question. How did the ancient Egyptians light the deep chambers of their tombs and temples? Many of these spaces extend dozens of meters into solid rock, where absolute darkness reigns. The walls and ceilings of these places are covered with delicate paintings and complex hieroglyphs. To perform such detailed work, a bright and stable light source is necessary. The official answer is that they use torches and oil lamps, but this answer hides a colossal contradiction. Any open flame produces soot, a black, greasy layer that inevitably deposits on the walls and especially the ceiling. However, the ceilings of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings are immaculate. There is not a single trace of soot. Decades of theories, such as the use of mirrors to reflect sunlight, were debunked by practical experiments. Light loses 99% of its intensity after a few turns in narrow corridors. So what light did they use? The answer may be engraved on the walls of the mysterious Temple of Hathor in Dendera. In a subterranean crypt, we find a low relief, unlike anything in Egyptian art. We see human figures holding enormous pear-shaped objects. Inside each object, a wavy line looking like a snake extends from one end to the other. The base of these objects rests on a support shaped like a lotus flower, from which a thick cable emerges, leading to a kind of box. Egyptology offers a symbolic explanation. It is a creation myth. But let's look at this image through the eyes of an engineer. The pear-shaped object is a glass bulb with a partial vacuum. The internal serpent actually represents an electrical discharge, a plasma filament. The lotus flower at the base is a socket, an electrical insulator. The thick cable is a power cord, and the box is the power source. The most revealing element is the pillar supporting it all, known as the Djed pillar, officially a symbol of stability, but its shape, a series of insulators on a rod, is identical to the design of a high-voltage insulator from the 19th century. Numa compared the Dendera relief with diagrams of electrical devices and found an almost perfect resemblance to the first gas discharge lamps, like the Crookes tube, a cold light source that produces no soot and is ideal for work in confined spaces. Could what we see in Dendera be more than a myth? Could it be a technical manual? The image suggests knowledge of something similar to electric light. If they mastered light, what about the air? In 1898, in a tomb in Saqqara, a small wooden object was found. For decades it was kept in the Cairo Museum, labeled as a toy bird. But it has no legs or feathers. Its wings have a clear aerodynamic profile designed to create lift. And most importantly, its tail is vertical like the rudder of an airplane, not horizontal like a bird's. A vertical stabilizer serves to provide directional stability in flight, a purely aeronautical concept. We created an exact three-dimensional model of the Saqqara bird and entered it into Numa for a digital wind tunnel simulation. The conclusion was shocking. The object is a highly efficient model of a glider with ideal flight characteristics. It is not a toy bird, it is a model of an aircraft. For light and flight, energy is needed. And here we find another piece of the puzzle in ancient Mesopotamia, the Baghdad Battery, a clay jar with a copper cylinder and an iron rod, dating to about 200 BC. When filled with an acidic solution, like grape juice, it produces an electric current. It is a proven fact. They knew the principles of galvanic power generation. Numa analyzed the probability of the lamp, the glider, and the battery being isolated coincidences. The chance is statistically zero. The system sees a clear connection. They are fragments of the same lost technological tapestry, a technology based on electricity that would explain how they cut and drilled granite with the precision we saw before, not with copper, but perhaps with ultrasonic tools or high-power drills. Electricity was the key, and the Dendera lamp is the socket they left on the wall of history. We found the tracks in Dendera, the image of a light that generates no smoke. In Saqqara, the model of a flying machine. In Baghdad, the spark of a chemical battery, fragments of a forgotten technology hidden in the heart of Egypt. Until now, our investigation has focused on the Nile Valley, and therein lies a great trap for our understanding. We risk seeing all this as an isolated miracle, an inexplicable phenomenon born and died in the desert sands. But what if the Giza Plateau is not the epicenter, but just one of the capitals? What if the pyramid is not a unique work, but just the most famous node in a planetary network of megalithic constructions erected by the same hand? To understand the full picture, we need to expand the map of our search. We leave Egypt behind and embark on a journey through the most enigmatic places on the planet. We will be looking for the same technological signature, the same engineering genius, the same impossible precision. We will gather the evidence of a single global project. This is the 5th chapter, and its name is the signature of a global project. Our first stop, the dizzying heights of the Andes in Bolivia. Here, at nearly 4,000 meters above sea level, in thin air where even breathing is difficult, lie the ruins of Pumapunku. Official science attributes them to the Tiwanaku culture around the 6th century of our era. But what we see here has no relation to the technology of the Andean peoples. We see the remains of a modular construction, like a giant building toy that was disassembled. The material is andesite and diorite, extremely hard volcanic rocks, almost as resistant as diamond. Bronze tools are useless against them. Still, the site is covered with gigantic blocks of perfect geometric shapes, surfaces polished like mirrors, and 90-degree angles so precise they seem laser-cut. The most impressive are the so-called H-blocks, dozens of identical standardized pieces with a complex design of multiple fittings, grooves and perforations. They look like they came off the assembly line of a high-tech factory. Numa analyzed three-dimensional scans of these blocks. The system confirmed the size deviation between different pieces is less than a fraction of a millimeter. This is mass production of standardized components. The analysis of the holes revealed marks of high-speed drilling. The technology behind Puma Punku exhibits the same advanced engineering signature we saw in the granite boxes of Egypt. It is the first point on our global map. Now we go further north to Peru, near the legendary city of Cusco. There rise the walls of Sacsayhuaman, 3 rows of cyclopean walls built with limestone blocks weighing between 100 and 200 tons. Some exceed 360 tons. But it is not the weight that shocks, it is the method. It is called polygonal masonry. The blocks are not rectangular. Each is a unique polygon with up to 12 sides or more. And these immense asymmetric rocks are fitted into each other without any mortar, with such absurd precision that a knife blade cannot be inserted between them. How? How to give such a complex shape to a 200-ton block and then fit it perfectly with its neighbors? Like the pieces of a 3-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, Numa simulated the process and concluded that the trial and error method would be logistically absurd. The only explanation is a technology capable of softening the stone or scanning and cutting it perfectly on the first try. And here is the crucial fact. On top of these megalithic walls, the Incas, who arrived much later, built their own structures with small, irregular stones joined by mud. They found these walls, admired them as the work of gods, but could not replicate the technology. It is exactly the same scenario as in Egypt, a later civilization appropriating the legacy of one much older and more advanced. The signature is the same. We cross the largest ocean on the planet and arrive in Micronesia at the lost city of Nan Madol, an archipelago of nearly 100 artificial islands built on a coral reef made of gigantic basalt blocks weighing up to 50 tons. The total weight of the material exceeds 700,000 tons. The paradox is that on the neighboring island there is neither basalt in such quantity, nor enough population, nor wood for rafts, nor technology for such a feat. Local legends speak of magic, of stones flying through the air. We discard magic and ask Numa about the logistics. The response showed that the project would be unrealizable with primitive technologies. The legends about flying stones are the only way a primitive mind would have to describe a technology it did not understand, be it sonic levitation or advanced transport vehicles. Puma Punku, Sacsayhuaman, Nan Madol. Numa analyzed the technological markers of these and other sites, such as Baalbek in Lebanon and Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. The verdict is final. The probability of dozens of isolated cultures having independently invented and then forgotten the same set of super technologies is 0. This leads us to consider the possibility of a global civilization in prehistory. We see their works, but we do not see them. Where are they? This question leads us to seek answers no longer in stone, but in the oldest memory of humanity itself. Until this moment, we have acted as engineers and geologists. We weighed the stones, measured the angles, analyzed the traces of impossible machines, and gathered irrefutable proof of a prehistoric civilization with a technological signature spread across the entire planet. From Puma Punku to Egypt, from Baalbek to Nan Madol, we see their grand, silent, incomprehensible works, but we do not see their faces. Who were they, these architects of the world? Where did they come from, and where did they go? Material evidence has brought us to a dead end. The stone keeps the secret of how it was cut, but does not reveal the name of who cut it. Therefore, today we are forced to turn to a different archive, a non-material one, the only library that survived floods and ice ages, the collective memory of humanity. We will dive into the world of the oldest legends, myths, and sacred texts. We will not look in them for poetic metaphors, but for encoded historical chronicles, because every legend, at its core, contains an echo of truth. And today, we will explore how these echoes coming from all corners of the earth seem to point to the same shocking possibility. This is the 6th chapter, and we call it The Whisper of Universal Myths. Our search begins at the cradle of civilization in Mesopotamia. The ancient Sumerians left us thousands of clay tablets, and almost all of them claim the same thing. They say that knowledge, civilization, agriculture, writing, laws, and astronomy were not human inventions. They were a gift from beings who came from the heavens. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, which literally translates as those who from heaven to earth came. The texts describe their arrival in a deep past, when humanity was still wild. They were not ethereal spirits or allegorical gods. They were described as beings of flesh and blood who ate, drank, built, and even waged war. We entered the main Sumerian texts into Numa for a semantic analysis, filtering out the mythology to extract the core of the original information. The system detected recurring technological markers. The texts mention their celestial barks, or shining ships. They described their weapons that produced a glow like lightning and turned enemies to dust. They mentioned tools with which they cut the mountains as if they were cheese. This is not the language of myth. It is the language of a primitive man trying to describe high technology. A celestial bark is an aircraft. A weapon like lightning is an energy weapon. The tools that cut mountains are the same machines whose traces we found in Giza and Pumapunku. Now we travel to Central America. The main deity of the Mayans and Aztecs was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. Legends say he arrived from the sea in a boat that moved without oars. He was a fair-skinned, bearded man who taught astronomy, mathematics, and architecture to the tribes. In the heights of the Andes, we find a nearly identical story. The creator god Viracocha, also described as tall, fair-skinned, and bearded. Legends say it was he who built the cyclopean structures of Tiwanaku and Pumapunku in a single night, using the power of sound to move the stones. After his mission, he departed over the waters of the Pacific, promising to return. We gave Numa the task of comparing the myths of civilizing gods from all over the world. The system processed more than 500 legends from the 5 continents. The result was overwhelming. Despite enormous cultural differences, the same narrative repeats in almost 80% of cases. It always involves 5 key elements. First, the gods arrive from elsewhere, from the sky or the sea. Second, they have a different appearance from the local population. Third, they bring knowledge and technologies that transform society. Fourth, they are the builders of the megalithic structures. And fifth, at the end of their mission, they depart, but almost always promise to return. From the Sumerian Anunnaki and the Egyptian god Thoth to the Peruvian Viracocha and the Greek Titans, we hear the same story told in different languages. Numa concluded, the probability of dozens of isolated cultures having invented by chance the same complex archetype is null. Is this a coincidence or the reflection of a real global event? Perhaps our ancestors witnessed what we today call paleo-contact. They met the representatives of a more advanced civilization. Now the 2 streams of evidence, the material and the immaterial, meet. Those whom our ancestors called gods were the same engineers and architects whose works we investigated. Anunnaki, Viracocha, the Seven Sages, these are different names for the same group. They arrived on Earth with a purpose. They possessed technologies that, in the eyes of primitive man, seemed like magic. They created the global network of structures we call megalithic. They gave us the initial push and then, for some reason, departed. And what if the myths are not just fairy tales? What if they are an echo distorted by time of one of the most important events in our species' history? But this raises the final and deepest question. Why? What was the goal of all this titanic work? This forces us to ask the ultimate question. If they weren't tombs or temples for the gods, were they then machines of the gods? To answer, we need to leave the myths behind and embrace physics. We have walked an incredible path. We dismantled the official history, deciphered a star map engraved on Earth, found the fingerprints of advanced technology, and heard the echo of an ancestral contact in the myths of all peoples. We concluded that the megaliths of our world are the legacy of a global civilization, probably of external origin. But the fundamental question persists. Why? What was the final purpose of this colossal project? To answer, we need to stop seeing these structures as dead monuments and start seeing them as what they probably are: machines, functional devices. Today, we set aside archaeology and mythology to speak the language of physics. We will analyze the materials, the structure, and the location of the pyramids to unravel their true function. This is the final chapter of our investigation, and we call it the Planetary Energy Network. The first clue is in the material. The internal chambers of the Great Pyramid are made of Aswan granite. Why granite and not the abundant limestone? Official science says it was because it was beautiful and durable. This is the answer of those who do not want to see. In a high-tech device, the choice of material is dictated by function. Numa analyzed the composition of Aswan granite. The system immediately highlighted its main component. More than 55% is crystalline quartz. Quartz has a unique property called the piezoelectric effect. When compressed or subjected to vibration, it generates an electric charge, and the inverse is also true. Now imagine the king's chamber, dozens of tons of quartz-rich granite under the pressure of millions of tons of stone above. What if this pressure is part of the project? And what if the Earth itself is the source of vibration? Our planet constantly vibrates at very low frequencies. It is its natural pulse. Numa simulated what would happen if the chamber were a giant resonator tuned to the Earth's pulse. The result was an incredible image, the vibrations of the Earth's crust, amplified by the mass of the pyramid, would make the quartz in the granite vibrate in unison. Through the piezoelectric effect, this mechanical vibration would be converted into electrical energy. This transforms the king's chamber into the heart of a geomechanical power plant. But where did this energy go? The pyramid is built with two types of limestone. The polished outer casing was an excellent electrical insulator. The inner blocks, more porous and with a high magnesium content, had semiconductor properties. The entire pyramid functioned as a gigantic capacitor, a granite generator at the center, a semiconductor layer around it, and an insulating shell on the outside. Ventilation shafts, perfectly straight, were not for air. They were waveguides that channeled the generated energy to the top. The pyramid was crowned by a pyramidion of electrum, an alloy of gold and silver, one of the best conductors that exist. The pyramid was not just a power plant, it was a wireless energy transmitter on a planetary scale. And this leads us back to our global map. Numa analyzed the location of the main megalithic sites in the world, not by geography, but by geophysics. A shocking truth emerged. Giza, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, Easter Island. None of them are located by chance. They are positioned at unique points over tectonic faults, at nodes of the Earth's geomagnetic grid, or over quartz deposits. Their location was chosen with the same criteria we use today to build power plants. All these structures are components of a single energy grid that enveloped the planet, capable of extracting, converting, and transmitting the Earth's own energy. We are looking at the remains of an ancient electrical grid that powered the civilization of the gods. A clean and powerful grid far beyond our own. This explains everything: the choice of materials, the internal structure, the precise location. But it also leads us to the darkest question of all. If they possessed such power, why did they disappear? What could destroy those who controlled the planet's energy? Was it a catastrophe, a war, or a deliberate departure? Legends like that of Atlantis, which speak of a cataclysm caused by the misuse of energy crystals, may be a distorted memory of a catastrophic failure in this grid. An event that plunged the world into a period of forgetting, a global amnesia from which humanity is only now beginning to awaken. If you enjoyed this account, your subscription to the channel helps us continue investigating themes like this. We would love to read your reflection on the subject in the comments and know which city you are following us from. Thanks for watching.